With the general election almost upon us, the BBC is delighted in finding some supposedly offensive remarks written by Reform candidates. So strap yourself in, guys, because as the BBC is telling us, there's going to be some strong language and far-right views ahead. We begin with Simon Moorhead, who referenced the murder of Jo Cox, stating, "Jo Cox was a dreadful woman with bad ideas. No one wanted her dead, though. Personally, I fail to see what's wrong with someone having that opinion. He's not celebrating her death in any way. And further, despite Jo Cox's murder being gruesome and tragic, it doesn't mean you have to agree with her political positions after." Next up, we have an Andrew Banwell, a candidate for Thornbury and Yates, who referred to Theresa May as Merkel's bitch. Again, strong language, but he's not saying anything wrong here. It's just like when people used to call Tony Blair George Bush's poodle. But on we go again. Next we have a fella called Malcolm Culpis. He stated under a video of two women dancing they were behaving like a gutter slut and referred to one woman as a malignant old hag. Again, strong-ish language, but nothing worse than you'd hear down the pub on an average Friday night. But intent on scraping the barrel to the very last wood chip, the BBC have more. John Edwards, a candidate for Southampton Test, referred to women appearing on ITV2's Love Island as thick tarts, and the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, Jo Swinson, as a gobby bird. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get to sleep tonight after hearing such hateful and awful language. And then finally, we have one which is supposed to be a big gotcha moment from the BBC, but I think is quite a fair point. This fella called Ian Gribben, a candidate for Bexhill and Battle, stated, "Right now, all men pay for all women. We pay 80% of tax and you take out 80%. The fact you're able to write on a technological device is all down to us." He continues, "The cultural feminisation of the West is a disaster of epic proportions. We have elevated female characteristics, especially neuroticism, to the highest levels. Hysteria is now commonplace. The evidence from repeated psychologically testing is that women are appalling at taking criticism. Modern feminism belongs in the sewer of self-hate from which it came. You say it yourself, you're all jealous of the perceived freedoms of men." Again, some strong-ish language, but you will hear this sort of thing down an average pub in the UK most evenings. Many people agree that the Western world is way too hysterical and woke these days. But bear in mind, this is the very worst the BBC could come up with. You'd think they'd do better than that, wouldn't you? Bear in mind they're all metropolitan trendy liberals who despise reform. But in the interest of editorial balance, do you think the BBC are going to do a piece like this on the Labour Party? And it's not like there isn't loads of material there for them as well. Take Jovan Owusu Nepal. He's contesting the Clacton seat against Farage. He says he's doing it for every black and brown person in the UK, as well as saying his favourite drink is white people's tears. But remember, apparently black people can't be racist towards white people, so we just have to accept it's our awful white fragility to think that this is a problem. Yet while the liberal media go through everything any reform candidate has ever said with a fine-tooth comb, we're also getting opinion pieces from Humza Yousaf in The Guardian telling us that Islamophobia has poisoned our politics. Now I wonder if Humza Yousaf and the BBC ever bother covering stories such as this. Here's a Muslim man on top of a church ripping down the cross. And here's a Muslim woman throwing rocks at Mother Mary at a church in Bradford recently. And here's a young Muslim woman who's often invited onto the mainstream media to tell us all how Islamophobic we are, celebrating the October 7th attacks recently.
Nothing will ever be able to take back this moment. This moment of triumph, this moment of resistance, this moment of surprise, this moment of humiliation on behalf of the Zionist entity. Nothing, ever.
It's odd, isn't it, how the liberal media see a few risque comments from reform candidates as beyond the pale, yet this sort of behaviour doesn't get any attention at all and is not seen as hateful in their eyes for some reason. Yet as much as they complain about supposed Islamophobia, many of us are sick and tired of these double standards well held up by Angela Rayner here, dressing very modestly as you can tell as she addresses a bunch of Muslim men. Do you think she would dress like that if she was speaking to a bunch of blokes who were going to vote reform? Do you think she'd have a few things to say about there being no women there? And as I often say on this channel, simply being concerned with some of the things you see coming out of the religion of peace doesn't make you some hateful psychopath. It's perfectly logical to be concerned with the viciousness that some Muslims display. Here's an example from Pakistan recently where a tourist was burnt alive for supposed blasphemy. So it seems to me then that we have quite a big double standard for reform candidates and members of the religion of peace. These are just my thoughts, however. Do let me know what you think down below and do consider subscribing to the channel.